We are in the third week of this Good to Know series where we're talking about things that are good to know, even if they're things that might be awkward or uncomfortable to talk about at times. Church is a place where we can talk about everything, so we're talking about it here. We've been talking about sex and sexuality and how that looks in your life as a Christian in a world that is saturated with this topic with all kinds of different perspectives. So let me let you in on a little story. When I was eighth grade. Do we have any eighth graders in here? Yeah. So when I was your age, there's a dress code at my school. I think I've shared this before. And my hair was always too long for it, so I was always told I'd get detention. So there's one day I had to get a haircut, and it was Sunday night when I remembered, and I knew I'd get a detention Monday morning if I showed up without a haircut. So I was like, Mom, can you please just a touch off so I don't get in trouble, and then I'll actually go get a cut later. Well, she thought she was some kind of hairstylist or something, so she's snipping away, and I'm seeing flakes of hair falling on my shirt. I'm like, that feels like a lot more hair. Well, she butchered my hair, so it was one of those things that I wished I could have kept secret longer, but I tried. You're not allowed to wear hats at my school, but I tried to have my hood up for my coat and kind of hide it so nobody could see, and until finally a teacher told me I needed to take the hood off, and and then it's everyone's laughing, and it's a terrible childhood trauma I don't want to relive, but it's one of those things that you wish you could keep it secret. And if we're honest, we all have secrets that maybe are a little deeper than a haircut that nobody can just see by looking at you. And the tough thing is when we keep things inside as a secret, it wears on us. You guys ever been caught in something where you felt like you had to keep a secret? And you almost spilled beans several times, whether it's a secret for your friend or something. It's you were talking to somebody and you almost said something, or you said something oh, well, obviously they can't do that. And they're like, why? And you're like, because of the secret I'm not supposed to say or not supposed to know. It's a lot of pressure to keep a secret. And when we keep secrets of our own and we don't want to tell anybody, it's a lot. And in relation to the series that we're talking about, whenever we deal with sexual sin of any kind, sin that we know is wrong, and maybe it has to do with asking friends for nudes or something like that, or maybe it's just a pornography addiction or whatever it is. We talked about this a little last week. We like to keep that secret. We keep that close to the chest because it's something that we're ashamed of, most of us. In pornography, just to define it again, we talked about it last week, but it's any picture, video, or written material that shows or describes sex, sexual acts, or naked bodies in ways meant for sexual enjoyment. And so This is something that, especially as Christians, we keep this a little more secret than maybe some other people because, if we're Christian, we feel like we should know better. But because of some of the addictive qualities with this, sometimes it makes it more difficult for us to, let people know what we're struggling with. And so as Christians, a lot of the time what happens is, specifically with this issue, Maybe you found it by accident. Maybe you got a notification. Maybe somebody at your school sent you something, and then you didn't know what to do with it. Well, maybe that curiosity, started to bloom, and then you started to actively search for it. And then before you knew it, it became an addiction. That's the story of many, 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 many people. Statistically, that's the story of most people, right? And statistically, you guys are older than the age of first exposure to this kind of stuff. So it's important that we should talk about it, because what do? We talked about this a little bit last week, but what I really kind of want to focus on this week is the secretive side of it, because when we keep this kind of stuff secret, it just grows. It gets worse. The addiction gets stronger. And I recognize that's not the case for everybody. Some of you in the room, you've probably never been exposed, you never thought about it. Maybe you're still feeling weird about it, feel gross about it, don't even want to. You don't even want to know, and that's fine too, right? Everybody's in a different place. But I just have to let you know, because this is so common for kids your age to deal with, we got to talk about it in the open. Because when we keep it in the dark, when we keep it secret, that's where the enemy grows. That's where his power grows. It's only in the light that darkness can be extinguished. And so here's the thing. With pornography, even if you're looking at it alone, even if there's no other person involved, it affects all our relationships. It affects our relationship with God because, God tells us not to look with lust at people, not to look at people that way. It affects our relationship with him because we're in sin, and sin separates us from God. And also, it affects our relationships with others now and in the future. Because the thing about this whole thing, as we'll get into a little bit today, but the things that happen online affect our real world realities. That's what we talked a lot about last week. And it's especially true to this. And the big lie that is easy for us to buy into and believe is that, oh, well, it doesn't hurt anybody, it's only me, it doesn't affect other people. And that's just not true. It does affect your relationship with God, and it affects your relationships with other people now and in the future. And what a lot of people don't know is that the people on the other end of that screen are often exploited to be making those videos or those pictures. So you just got to know those things. It absolutely affects everybody, and so it's not just a you thing. So over the past few weeks, as we've been talking about these kinds of issues, I want us to dive into a little bit of a book we haven't quite gotten to. We talked a lot first week we talked from Genesis, which was God's original design for sexuality. Then last week we talked from Paul and his letter to the Corinthians, where he said, flee from sexual sin. You guys remember this? And then this week we're actually going to read from the disciple who did not abandon Jesus when he was, do you guys remember from the game? John, right? We're going to read from John. And it's funny, John authored the Gospel John. And so anytime that John refers to himself when he's retelling the events of the Gospels, he just says the disciple whom Jesus loved, right? Can you imagine, like you're writing your biography someday, or maybe you're writing the biography of a friend, and every time you refer to yourself, you're like, and this person's best friend, me, right? And you just write that into history, right? But I'm sure there's lots of reasons for that. Probably one of them being that he did not abandon Jesus. But it's funny, he refers to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. And if you watch The Chosen, actually, the Jesus show, they kind of poke fun of him. Well, everybody knows you're his favorite, right? Like they kind of said that in one of the scenes recently. And so it's just kind of funny. That's actually scriptural. But this is what he says. The good news is that things that we keep secret don't have to stay secret. And this is why. This is the message we heard from Jesus and now declare to you. God is what? Okay, just making sure you're paying attention. God is light, and there is no darkness in him at all. So, if we are lying, we are lying if we say we have fellowship with God, but go on living in spiritual darkness. We are not practicing the truth. But if we're living in the light, as God is in the light, then we have fellowship with each other, and the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin. So you see here, it's when we keep things secret, when we keep things in the dark, that actually we're lying to ourselves. We're actually not living in the truth. We're not living in the freedom. But when we step into the light, that's when our relationship with others and ourselves with God is really restored. So he obviously doesn't use the word pornography here, but we can see how this obviously applies when it comes to this topic. This is probably the topic that's easiest for all people, but especially as Christians striving to follow Jesus, to keep secret. And especially in our cultural context today, with the resources and technology available to us, this is something that affects so many people. And I've seen it ruin lives. I've seen it ruin marriages. I've seen it just wreak havoc on all kinds of people. I don't want that for you. So this is really important. Since God is light, and sin is the opposite of God's light, it creates separation between us and God. And it doesn't just, this is why this doesn't just impact our relationship with God. It affects our relationship with others because it actually rewires your brain to think about people as objects rather than as people with feelings, thoughts, fears, dreams, right? Here's the thing. When we look at pornography and we tell ourselves, oh, well, this is just a me, this doesn't affect anybody else, it's just not true. It clearly affects other people. It clearly affects your relationship with God. And when we view pornography, what it does is we're trying to satisfy sexual desires the way we want. We're looking for the things that we want. What it teaches us about sex is that it's for us. It's for me, right? Sex is for my enjoyment. But the problem is when you try to bring that into a relationship later in life, when you're looking for that person that you're going to marry, that spouse, when you are married, when you have kids, when you're living life with another person and you are committed in marriage together, and this is an active part of your life, it's not about what you want. Sex is for connection. And so when we try to use porn to fulfill a legitimate need that we have for connection, what we do is we make that connection about us and not mutually about each other. Does that make sense? It distorts not only the way we see other people, but it distorts how we think connection actually happens. And so I know that's some of that gets deeper than what most kids your age realize. Because most kids your age just don't think about this topic in that way. But this absolutely affects your relationships with others. It affects your relationship with your future spouse. And it teaches you that sex is for you and you only. And that's just not what it's for. God designed this so that we could enjoy it with our person, with our significant other, with our spouse, through the bondage of marriage and the commitment. Because when we view pornography, what it teaches us is that sex is the goal of a relationship. And that's actually not true. Sex is not the goal of a relationship, right? It's the result of a healthy relationship under the safety of a committed marriage, right? Psychologists have talked about, and there's different lines of thought in this, but I tend to agree that we experience all positive emotions under the umbrella of one positive emotion. Under this one emotion, under this one thing, that's where we experience all positive emotions. And that one emotion, that one thing is safety. Think about it like if you're going to go bungee jumping, right? Well, jumping off a cliff does not sound particularly fun to me as somebody who doesn't like heights. But I could see where people get an adrenaline rush and it's something exciting and you get to jump off and experience it. Or think about the zip line at Allendale, right? You got the zip line. Now, imagine removing the safety harness when you do that and just like free holding on. Is that actually fun? No. Why? Because it's not safe. You could actually die or get hurt, right? But when you have the safety harnesses, when you have the bungee attached to you, well, that makes that adrenaline rush under the umbrella of safe. And it makes it fun. It makes it exciting. It makes it enjoyable. Now, the same is true when it comes to this regard. The bungee cord, the safety harness, is marriage. When you don't have marriage, it's not safe. Now, our world will tell you about safe sex and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. And actually, most of that's wrong. Okay? It teaches you to think about this stuff in a way that's actually not helpful right now. Okay? Because what's actually safe, what God says, is what makes this stuff safe and therefore enjoyable and exciting and good and all those things is marriage. Because when you're committed to that person and sex is the result of your marriage and of your healthy relationship, then it's wonderful. But when it's taken outside of that, then it complicates your relationships because you're not committed, because it won't last. It clouds your emotions. So often, if you see red flags about a person, you're like, oh, I should break up with them. If sex is involved already, it clouds your emotions and it inhibits your ability to maybe make the decision to break off that relationship when you know it's unhealthy. Because you feel connected, you feel bonded. That's what sex does. And pornography teaches us that it's all about me. It's all about my enjoyment. And it's really hard to live with sexual integrity when our mind is being messed up by what we're not supposed to be looking at or engaging with when it comes to this topic. So if we want to live with sexual integrity, we have to weed this kind of stuff out. And this is what John continues to say. He says, If we claim to have no sin, we're only fooling ourselves and not living in the truth. But if we confess our sins to him, he is faithful and just to forgive our sins and to cleanse us from all wickedness. It's only through confession. Because think about it, if you're holding secrets, people don't know the real you. Therefore, how can you feel true, like fully known and loved for who you are? You don't have confidence in that because there's parts of you that you're keeping away from everybody. So it's only through confession where you're able to experience that wholeness. And so confession is good and confession is powerful. And if there were two things I would encourage you to do in living this out, it'd be one, talk to God. Because while I understand, and you probably understand, God knows all things already anyway. So he already knows what you're dealing with, so talk to him about it. Put it out in the open. Don't allow it to put up a wall between you and God in your prayer life. Talk to God about it. Address it head on. Secondly, talk to someone you trust. Talk to someone who loves you, who will help hold you accountable, who will maybe help you implement some boundaries in your life that'll be helpful in this regard. But talk to somebody that you trust. Bring what's secret into the light so that the light can disinfect what was growing in the dark. Confession is good and it's powerful. So as you get ready to go to your groups, is there something that you're struggling with? And it doesn't even have to necessarily relate to this topic. If it does, awesome. But if not, is there something that you're struggling with that you need to confess to a trusted adult in your life? Would you just think through that? You guys will finish this discussion in your groups, and then we'll be done for the week. So let's go ahead and pray.